What does a narcissistic, borderline, histrionic, or psychopathic message look like when they're trying to return to you? I'll begin with this example. 3 months after a painful breakup, a message appears. I've been thinking about you. I made a mistake. Can we talk? It can feel like proof that the other person finally understands. But what does that return actually tell you? Only that contact has resumed, nothing else. The message may bring relief. It may sound like confirmation that the relationship was real or that the loss changed the other person, but it doesn't by itself tell you why they're returning. It doesn't prove love, remorse, change, or repair, and it doesn't create an obligation to reopen access to you. We're going to talk about in this episode hoovering, why they come back. While we can never tell what another person secretly feels, what we can tell is why the same return can perform very different psychological or practical functions. I'll give you 4 questions that will help you evaluate what the return means for your trust, your safety, and your access without your having to pretend you can read another person's mind. The central idea is simple. Return has a function, and the distinction is just as important here. Return is not repair. Let's go back to our example. Jordan and Casey ended a painful relationship 3 months ago. Casey now sends Jordan this message. I've been thinking about you. I made a mistake. Can we talk? We're going to keep the message exactly the same. We're not going to add a threatening text in one version, flowers in another version, and an apology in a third version. The behavior stays the same, so we can ask a more specific question. The question is this: what function might this return be serving? That word function doesn't mean Casey has consciously created a plan. It asks a practical question. What might the contact be doing for Casey? It could be restoring something. It could be reducing something. It could be obtaining something or beginning something. We'll let the possibilities unfold one at a time. The message proves none of them. The point is to understand what could be happening. Then observe the evidence that follows. One thing before we start this lesson: use conduct that's already occurring. Don't reopen contact or provoke a reaction to test a theory. Show or slow, limit, condition, or refuse access only when doing so is safe and lawful. If the return includes threats, stalking, coercion, violence, financial intrusion, identity theft, or repeated boundary violations, move directly to a safety response instead of experimenting with motive. So let's go over the different behaviors. Wagner describes one form of narcissistic hoovering as an attempt to change a threatening internal picture of the former partner back, back into an idealized one and resume the shared fantasy. What could that feel like for Casey? The breakup leaves Casey carrying a threatening internal picture of Jordan, and that picture produces tension and anxiety. Hoovering is anxiolytic. Renewed contact offers a possible reversal. If Jordan returns to the old role, Casey may feel that the relationship story can continue and the internal threat has been reduced. What could that look like? Casey may try to pull Jordan back into the old relationship role before showing an ability to address the rupture itself. That's one possible narcissistic function. It's not a conclusion about Casey from one message. Beckman also describes narcissistic probing. Before reacquisition, the returning person may test whether renewed contact is likely to succeed without producing another rejection or injury. In our example, Casey's message can function as a probe. It opens the door without yet risking everything. If Jordan responds warmly, Casey learns that access may still be available. If Jordan doesn't respond, Casey hasn't made the most exposed possible declaration. Again, that's just one hypothesis. The important point isn't to decode the wording like a secret message. The important point is to observe what Casey does next, especially when Jordan doesn't immediately restore the old level of access. Now, keep the same message, but change the possible function. Vaknin uses the phrase external regulation to describe internal regulation that a person experiences or attributes as coming from somebody outside the self, an external regulator. In other words, the person becomes associated with the ability to calm down, make decisions, feel safe, maintain stability, or experience continuity. This is a borderline structure. A borderline structure is where a trusted partner may be experienced as regulating moods, regulating emotions, regulating decisions and choices. The partner may also function as a secure base associated with safety, stability, and predictability. So, what could Casey's return mean in this version? The rupture may have removed someone Casey experienced as essential to emotional regulation. Casey's message may be an attempt to restore the relationship, not primarily because the original injury has been understood, but because life without Jordan feels disorganized, frightening, or emotionally unmanageable. This is linked to abandonment with the loss of an external regulation source and hoovering as one attempted reversal. The emotion can be sincere, the panic can be sincere, the longing can be sincere, but sincerity or sincere distress isn't the same as repair. Casey may desperately want Jordan back and still be unable to respect Jordan's pace. Casey may genuinely experience Jordan as safety and still pressure Jordan to resume an unhealthy regulatory role. Casey may mean every word in the moment and still lack the capacity to build a different relationship. This is why we have to separate what Casey feels and intends from what Casey can sustain and repeatedly does. Feeling and intention don't decide access or outcome by themselves. Understanding the possible function may support compassion or clarity. It doesn't require Jordan to become Casey's regulator. A third possibility is attention. Narcissistic supply has a delineation from histrionic attention. Narcissistic supply supports a grandiose self view. Histrionic attention supports being noticed and feeling existent. That distinction is important because attention isn't always doing the same psychological job. In histrionic functioning, attention may regulate self worth, attractiveness, power, safety, and anxiety. Another person's gaze may support identity, self confidence, and self esteem. So, Casey's message may be trying to restore visibility. Jordan's response may confirm that Casey can still attract attention, can still affect Jordan, can still be remembered, can still occupy a meaningful place in Jordan's emotional life. The sought after experience may not be the exact relationship that existed before. It may be the return of an audience and the feeling of being seen. What happens if Jordan offers a calm conversation but refuses romance? What happens if Jordan is kind but no longer impressed, captivated, or emotionally activated? What happens when Casey receives contact but not the old audience role? Those responses can give Jordan information about the pattern. And notice the deeper lesson. A person can say, I miss you, while missing a function you performed. That doesn't mean the person felt nothing for you. It means you need more evidence before deciding that the return can say what the return can safely support. Now consider a more instrumental possibility. Psychopathy is goal-oriented with possible pursuit of money, sex, power, fame. success, or other aims, goals. It includes ruthlessly trampling on people in pursuit of the goal, what's referred to as high mac. This doesn't mean wanting access makes somebody psychopathic. It means that in an instrumental pattern, the relationship may be organized around what the other person can obtain. Casey's return may seek practical access, a place to live, transportation, help with work, a social network, money, sex, emotional labor, reputation repair, contact with somebody else, or simply the convenience of a familiar person who has solved problems before. The message can still sound emotional. I've been thinking about you. That could be true. I made a mistake. That can also be true. But the useful question is, what is Casey asking to regain? If Jordan removes the practical benefit but leaves a limited path for unaccountable conversation, does Casey remain interested? If Jordan won't lend money, provide housing, resume sex, fix a crisis, or restore social standing, does the apparent wish for repair continue? You don't need to accuse the returning person of manipulation to observe the sequence. You can separate the stated reason from the access being requested and then watch what happens. Very important. Not every return is pathological. People can get lonely. People become ambivalent after a breakup. People regret decisions. People miss someone. People sometimes return with a sincere wish to repair. There remain, these remain possible non-pathological functions of return. But ordinary regret doesn't prove repair either. A sincere Casey may still lack the skills or capacity to change. Casey may feel remorse and still become defensive when Jordan names the harm. Casey may want another chance while expecting trust to return immediately. Casey may have changed in one area, but not in the pattern that made the relationship unsafe in the first place. The point isn't to distrust every emotion. The point is to stop asking emotion to prove what only behavior over time can establish. Jordan doesn't have to decide that Casey is narcissistic, borderline, histrionic, or psychopathic, sincere or insincere before setting a boundary. Jordan can say, I'm willing to have one conversation, but I'm not ready to restart the relationship. Jordan can also say no. The level of access can be based on the history, the present conduct, and Jordan's safety rather than certainty about Casey's hidden motive. The book OLNE supports autonomy, distinct needs, clear boundaries, open communication, and responsibility for one's own emotional well being while still recognizing consistency and support in relationships. That is not radical isolation. It isn't somebody saying nobody should rather, nobody should need anybody. It means care doesn't erase self ownership, and another person's distress doesn't automatically transfer authority over your access. Let's go back to the distinction. What's the difference between return and repair? Return establishes contact, repair requires something more: truthful ownership, respect for the other person's pace and boundaries, concrete change, and sustained evidence after the emotional reunion moment passes. Truthful ownership sounds like Casey naming what Casey did without forcing Jordan to minimize it. Respect for pace sounds like Casey accepting that Jordan needs time, needs limits, distance, or no renewed relationship at all. Concrete change means something observable has become different. Not just a promise, not just insight, not just emotional intensity. And sustained evidence means the change continues after Casey receives attention, reassurance, forgiveness, sex, practical help, or renewed access. That's why A dramatic return can be emotionally powerful and still tell you very little about repair. The return adds a new evidence. It isn't proof of repair by itself. So, what do you do with this information? Use 4 questions. I'm calling this a return check. First question: what changed before the return? Did Casey lose another relationship? Source of attention? Did they lose a home, financial resource, social position, or emotional support? Did Casey begin therapy or another serious process of reflection? Did a practical crisis occur? Did Jordan become less available? You're not looking for one answer that proves motive. You're rebuilding the sequence around the contact. Second, what is Casey asking to regain? So first question was, what changed before the return? Second question, what are they asking to regain? A conversation, forgiveness, romance, sex, money, housing, reputation, emotional caretaking, immediate relief from guilt or panic? Be specific. Us can conceal several very different requests. First question was, what changed before the return? Second question, what are they asking to regain? The third is, what happens when access is slow, limited, conditional, or access is refused entirely? Does Casey respect Jordan's pace? Does Casey negotiate without punishment? Does Casey become threatening, coercive, intrusive, or retaliatory? Does Casey disappear once the desired benefit is unavailable? Or does Casey remain accountable even when the answer isn't immediate reconciliation? The response is observational information. It still doesn't reveal a diagnosis or establish one private motive. Fourth, what evidence continues after the emotional reunion moment passes? What is the pattern? What is the behavior, the conduct that continues after the emotional reunion moment passes? Does ownership continue? Do boundaries remain respected? Does a concrete change survive disappointment? Does Casey make repair when there's no immediate reward? Does the new behavior remain present after attention and access has been restored? Those 4 questions won't give Jordan certainty about Casey's mind. They give Jordan something more useful than that, a way to decide what available evidence supports. If the return includes threats, stalking, coercion, violence, financial intrusion, identity theft, or repeated boundary violations, assess those behaviors directly. Don't infer danger from a diagnostic label. And don't dismiss danger because no diagnosis exists. If the return is gentle, emotional, and apparently sincere, you still don't owe immediate access. You can recognize another person's pain without surrendering your pace. You can believe the emotion is real without treating it as proof of capacity. You can remain open to evidence without promising reconciliation. So, when the message arrives, remember what it establishes. It just establishes contact. Then ask, what function does the contact may serve or may be serving? What happens when access isn't immediate? Look for ownership, respect, concrete change, and sustained evidence. Return can begin repair. Return can also restore fantasy and restore regulation, an audience, or access, utility, instrumentality. The message won't settle the question for you. The pattern that follows will tell you what level of trust and access the evidence can support. Thanks for hoovering my video. This is Ron John. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
I don't want the person I invented in the dark. I want your particularities, every strange and living part. I want your particularities. ache, not the mask. I want the way you open and the shape of what you ask. Tell me what you carry when the world felt cold, what you never say out loud, what you only hold. Tell me how you hear me when my words come out wrong. What kind of touch is easy? What kind of touch is gone? Where your body closes, where your hope begins. I'm learning the weather under your skin. I don't want the person I invented in the dark. I want your particularities, every strange and living part. I want your particularities, not the ache, not the mask. I want the way you open in the shape of what you ask. If I love you, let me learn you, slow and true and bare, the map of every caution, the names of what you fear. If I love you, let me meet you, new each day, each time, not a borrowed little fantasy, but the real shape of your life. I don't want the person I